Welcome to the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. This is your go-to resource for personal growth, mastering communication, and influencing and persuasion techniques that will help you unleash the full potential of yourself and others. Here is your host, Alex Morgan.
Welcome to another episode of the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. My name is Alex Morgan, and I'm a master trainer of hypnosis and NLP. And today's guest is Christian Jack, a master in influence, persuasion, and sales. He has a track record of scaling businesses to multiple 8 figures. He's a sales expert, coaching hundreds of professionals on mastering key skills like communication, body language, and leadership. If you want anything you currently don't have in your life, Christian can teach you how to get it. Christian, thanks for joining the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Excited.
Yeah, me too. We're both kind of into influence and persuasion, so I was really happy to have you on. I'm really curious, though, because you also do this on the sales side of things. So what are some of the biggest problems, would you say, people have in sales before they kind of implement what you teach them?
I'd say the problems usually that people come to me with, like the things that they say and the things that are going on aren't always aligned. So they might come in saying, I want to be able to close more deals, or I want to be able to get prospects to open up to me more. Like they're just not sharing information with me, and I don't know why. Or maybe they're just getting like all these objections at the end of the call and they want to learn how to handle them. That's usually what people will kind of come to me with on the B2B, B2C side. On the B2B side, they're coming for like, help me fix my sales team, sales process, all that kind of good stuff. But it's funny, people always come with those problems, but like I said, it's usually a little bit more below the surface, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I totally get what you mean, because when I work with people, it's the same thing. They'll say, yeah, here's my problem. Then as you ask them a few questions, which I'm sure you're really good at teaching them these things, there's the deeper structure. So what are some of the deeper things you think then that people might not realize?
I think if we maybe just focus on like the sales people who want to get better at sales, or like people just who want to have more influence. Sometimes I work with CEOs who want to be able to lead their team better, communicate their vision at a higher level, people like that. One of the biggest things I would say that's holding people back from hitting those other things that they mentioned, like closing more deals, getting people to open up more. If I can maybe say 2 things. So 2 things that hold people back. Number 1 is their own internal confidence and authority that they're able to have with other human beings. And that kind of goes into a lot of different things. And then number 2 is their skill level and their ability to help other people feel safe and secure. Say those 2 things combined are some of the biggest things that I see, 100%.
Okay, so looking into helping others feel safe and secure, and then the first thing you mentioned, of course, is confidence. So I would think that me feeling confident would also then help someone else feel safe and secure if they were, seeing the influence and persuasion of my state. Do you find that to be true?
Sometimes. I think it can definitely be helpful if somebody lacks confidence in, let's say, they're coming in for, I don't know, let's say that you're selling like e-commerce coaching or something, right? Somebody wants to be able to leave their 9 to 5, start an e-commerce store, be able to live the dream, all that kind of good stuff. If you have the utmost confidence as a sales professional in that conversation, it can transfer to the other person if that's the way that person's life has been lived, right? If they trust people that have high confidence, then yes, that can also help them be more trusting of you and feel more safe. However, there are some other circumstances where maybe you see other people who have confidence and you see it as ignorance or arrogance. And so then those people, it kind of does the opposite effect. So, the confidence isn't as much what you portray to other people, but more so how you feel internally. And then what gets portrayed is kind of an after effect, right? It's a result of the internal work that you have inside of you. Almost like, when you have a piece of fruit and you squeeze it, like the juice comes out, and there's no faking the juice. It's not like you squeeze a lemon and orange juice comes out. It doesn't happen. Lemon juice comes out. And so oftentimes when you're in a sales conversation, like there's going to be some sort of squeeze. There's going to be some sort of disconnect. There's going to be some sort of objection. There's going to be some sort of limiting belief, whatever it might be. And when those things happen and like you start to have that squeeze, that's where your juice will naturally come out of you. Sounds a little weird to say, but your juice will come out of you. And your prospect will immediately be able to tell, like, are you a lemon, are you an orange, or an apple? And so like if you have fake confidence, you're probably going to be oozing something else that isn't nearly as good.
Interesting analogy. So you talked about the internal state. So how can someone then use their internal state to influence and persuade that other person? What are some easy ways to do that?
Well, I think the internal state doesn't necessarily do the influencing. The internal state is what will do a couple of things, right? If your internal state is at a point where you are highly confident and you are, there's no attachment to the sale, as an example, for salespeople, especially, that's a really big one. If your internal state is like that, your prospect is naturally going to be able to pick up on those cues in your nonverbal communication, your body language. You want to get into like woo-woo stuff, quantum mechanics and different things there. The prospect will pick up on that, and then that naturally gets communicated to their subconscious. And so then they just naturally feel a little bit safer, usually. Not always, but usually. So that can help you sell more effectively. And then the other side of things is when you are confident and you're not stressed or you're not anxious or anything like that, you do have your full, mental capacity. I forget where I saw the statistic. It was in some study. But when you feel anxious and when you feel stressed, right? And that like internal fight or flight response is kind of on edge, your body will naturally divert the blood from your internal organs, from your brain, to your extremities, so that you can, run away from the lion, as an example, like our ancestors would have. When you get scared, that's kind of where your animal brain goes. And so when you're in a conversation with a prospect and you feel nervous about like getting the sale, or maybe you're afraid that this person's going to give you an objection that you don't know how to handle, the exact same thing happens. And so then the statistic specifically said you have 20% of your typical mental capacity and like intelligence as you do when you are not anxious. So it's a huge difference. And so lots of people will like say, on role plays that I can do great. When we're outside of the call and I'm just practicing with my coach, like it's great. But then when I'm on the call, I just like freeze. I blank. I don't know what to say. It's like, it's a very good sign that it's probably in that internal confidence attachment to the sale. Those are more of the root causes.
So I was just thinking, as you were describing that 20%, they kind of lock and freeze up. So what kind of armor then do you give people to handle this once it's for real? Because we can only talk to a coach for so long.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think that's one of the things that really separates the greatest sales coaches and mindset coaches from the rest of the people who say that they're good at it. So if you look at, let's just say, someone who is considered the greatest mindset coach in the world, he's been published as such, etc., by other people. His name is Ed Milet. With the work that he does, I've personally done some coaching with him myself. And with the work that he does, it's a lot more on the side of just like bolstering you as a human being and the confidence that you have outside of like the sales context of things, outside of the performance of whatever you're doing. Like he'll work with all-star athletes. He'll work with world-class politicians. Those are the clients that he typically works with. And so those people, like there's oftentimes some sort of block in what they're doing. And so the biggest thing that he talks about, at least with me, when I was asking him, like, how do you actually do this? How do you work with people in this way? Is to take them out of that situation that they're in that's triggering that block and dealing with the issue separately. So sometimes that looks like, I have my own mindset coach right now, and we do a lot of hypnotic sessions, right? Getting to things that maybe happened in the past, sometimes even like, if you want to get real woo-woo, things that happened in your bloodline before you were even born that was passed down through your genes. Like there's a lot of different things that can go on, but I think the biggest key distinction is if you're struggling with something right now, is if you're able to take it out of context, out of whatever like you're doing at that moment, and deal with it separately, then you'll probably have the biggest payoff and the biggest difference. Because like it's really hard to be in a sales conversation and say like, I'm getting this objection and I'm worried when I get that objection. Like, what are you going to do? Just tell yourself, bat yourself on the head, stop being worried, stop being worried. Like that just doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. You can only jam your self-talk, as we like to call it in hypnosis, for so long. Look, none of that is woo-woo, passed down in the bloodline, genealogically, past lives.
100% real.
Yeah, all this, for anyone listening, all this is just your unconscious mind thinks in symbols and metaphors. So it's just creating different metaphors and stuff for you to create new meaning for yourself. So since you mentioned hypnotic sessions, and since I'm a hypnotist myself, how have you used that then to show up and, coach others and build that belief in yourself? What are some of the results you've seen from that?
Great question. So one of the biggest tools that I'll use is the timeline hypnosis, where basically you're imagining yourself flying up well above the timeline, and you're looking back into your past, and you do the 4 different positions: in front, behind, above, below, etc. And finding things that happened in the past, or things that people told you, or events that happened essentially that triggered your subconscious mind to react in a certain way to that event or to this thing that people tell you. And so then there's that anchor in the timeline of what happened before that your subconscious is chained to, basically. And if you're able to remove that and kind of use it, there's a few different techniques with that. You can see, imagining a movie in front of you playing of that event that happened. Like, do you see it more? Is it more vibrant visually or auditorily, right? And then, if it's visually, turn down the color, make the screen smaller. And you can do some different things to minimize that experience until it just about vanishes. And then now the meaning that you give to that event is based off of the anchor event. And so if the anchor is gone, then now you have fresh slate to assign a new meaning to that event that maybe you struggled with before. So now, the reason that you struggle with that objection, let's just say that it's like a very common one that I see with this is a spouse objection. So lots of people will come on the call, they want to move forward, but they want to run it by their spouse because they want to be respectful, right? There's something that happened in the past that anchored you into the place where you feel like it's respectful to run things by your spouse. And, there's some debate of whether that's a good thing or not, but at the end of the day, it's the meaning that you assign to things that happen in your life that dictate the feelings that you have, the emotions that come up, and the actions that you ultimately take, right? And so if we remove that anchor, minimize it, erase it, whatever it might be, then now when you get that objection, you're going to have a new meaning assigned to it. And it can be whatever you want it to be, which can be really scary. You can assign some really crazy shit, but that's where you got to trust your coach, right?
Totally. You have to trust your coach. You have to trust that since this is with sales too, you have to trust the rapport that you also have with your own unconscious mind, because a lot of people, that's why they go to see someone who does hypnosis. They actually lost rapport with their unconscious mind. So how can we possibly build such good, deep rapport if we don't even have it with ourselves? We don't even have control of ourselves. So do you actually, I'm curious, and do you actually see that if people come to you and they don't necessarily have control of a lot of things in their personal life, do you see it then not getting what they want also in sales? How do you see that?
Sometimes. I think there are times where I've seen a sales rep that is a total I don't want to use the word degenerate outside of sales and like in their own personal life, and they have zero control, like no discipline, no habits, etc. But then they come into sales and they just absolutely crush it. Sometimes that happens, and then other times people like that like have a really hard time, and sometimes the opposite is true. People with massive discipline and consistency in their personal life just can't make sales happen for some odd reason. So it's just different for everybody, and it really comes down to, I think, that what we call the meaning making formula of like what is the meaning that this person assigns to things. So maybe you have somebody who is quote unquote a total degenerate in their life, and the meaning that they assign to that is that like nothing matters, you can make whatever you want out of your life, and like you don't have to do this thing in order to get this result, and actions and outcomes aren't necessarily always aligned. It's just like, do your best. And so sometimes those people will just absolutely crush in sales because, somebody gives a spouse objection and you're just going to like throw that out the window because like just running it by your spouse doesn't do shit. Like that doesn't change whether you're going to succeed or not. And so like sometimes that'll work. And then sometimes people with more consistency and more discipline live by maybe a stricter set of rules. And so that's why I think a lot of times those people actually are less adept or less naturally skilled at sales. They have less of a knack for it because they do live by a set of rules. But then also at the same time, sometimes rules can be helpful. So like it's always a trading game,
Yeah, or we can just make new rules in our mind. I guess we can also do this. I do this with a lot of people, help them make new rules so they get new results. You mentioned nonverbal communication and things like this earlier, and I know that you're really intelligent with body language, tonality, and all of this. So what's a couple of things that people can do with nonverbal things to really influence and persuade another person then?
I think, again, I'll come to the influence and persuade part of things in a second, because there are a couple of ways that you can really use that. But with nonverbal communication, it's more focused on observation, right? And seeing what's happening and then interpreting it in clusters, right? So as an example, lots of people understand that the eyes are the key to the soul, like very common saying. I don't think people realize just how much so, but I think it's also fairly common knowledge. If you see somebody start blinking more quickly, if you had to guess, like if you're listening to this, do you think that they're more stressed now? Or do you think that their blink rate increasing is a sign that they are more relaxed? Usually, most people kind of intuit that it means they're more stressed, right? So the eyes are a fantastic way to kind of get a look into what a person is actually feeling, what emotions are going on inside of them right now. So if their blink rate increases, the number of blinks that they have in a minute or every few seconds, and then also the shutter speed, which is how quickly their eyelids actually move down and back up, right? The more quickly that they go, the more stressed, typically. Not always, but typically. And the opposite is also true. If you think about like a chihuahua, right? A chihuahua moves very, very quickly. And it's one of those animals that just looks like it's constantly stressed, right? And usually they live a shorter life than larger dogs, even though larger dogs, like they put more stress on their heart because they are larger. And larger dogs will move a lot more slowly. It's because they have confidence, right? A small dog is worried about everything like coming to get him and hurting him, and rightfully so, right? He's small. But then the bigger dogs don't give a shit about anything. They just like roll over, lay on their back, arms wide open. It's great. They're just loving life. And so the same sort of thing happens with body language. If you see somebody moving a lot more quickly after you've said something, or maybe they respond to a question and suddenly they like start fidgeting or like changing their chair, they cross their arms, like you can kind of see different triggers. There's a whole bunch of triggers, like 160 of them or something, that I studied, but I'm sure there's even more. But yeah, that's the observation side of things. Now, the way that you interpret those, like I said, are in clusters. So one thing doesn't necessarily mean another. If somebody's blink rate increases, it doesn't mean that they're more stressed. Maybe something just flew into their eye. You don't know. So you have to couple that thing with maybe also their dominant shoulder retreated, right? It's a protective mechanism. Maybe they cross their arms, and maybe even their fingers are out and they're clenched on their arms, right? Different things, maybe they're even turtling a little bit. Once you get multiple instances of like this behavior indicates more stress, this behavior also indicates more stress. Oh, they're doing this thing, which also indicates more stress. Then you cluster those together, and then you can kind of say with a little bit more certainty that this person is probably a little bit more stressed about what just happened, and you have to put it in context of what just happened and go back to that, right? And then on the influence side of things, I've just been going for a minute. I love this shit, if you can't tell. On the influence side of things, I think the biggest one that I like to use is gestural hemispheric tendency. So this is where essentially people will assign one side of their body to positive and negative things. So if somebody is talking about something like a great part of their life that they absolutely loved, they really enjoyed it, they're probably going to gesture, look, turn, lean towards one side of their body. And when they talk about negative things, they're probably going to lean towards another side, right? I didn't do that on purpose, but my right side is positive, my left side is negative. And so when I look and gesture to the right, things are positive, left is negative. So what you can also do in influence is mirror that. So if you want somebody to think negatively about a topic, you can get them to look or lean or gesture in that direction. You can also gesture in that direction to basically just give a signal to their brain that this is supposed to be negative, right? And then you can gesture to the other side to do positive. And so that's where you can really start to use nonverbal communication to influence behavior and influence people's thoughts and emotions on things. That's where things can kind of get pretty cool.
Yeah, super interesting. It's almost like you're anchoring them to one specific emotion, like you mentioned earlier.
Almost, yeah.
So what's something like, let's say you're going to do a sales call online, someone jumps on, you're asking them a few questions, building up that rapport with them. What's something that you can notice right away, or that's really easy for someone just beginning to notice in their body language or their tonality that's like really easy to spot?
I'd say the eyes, just paying attention to those is a really big one. You can very quickly see whether somebody is stressed coming into the call or if they're fairly relaxed. Another really easy one to see is lip compressions. So as they're speaking, if they, compress their lips, it means that they're usually like withholding some sort of information. They're thinking something else, but they're not necessarily telling you. Like just before I said that, I had a lip compression. I noticed it as I was saying it because I was thinking of it. I was thinking of other things that I could say, but went with lip compression because I feel like it's the most pertinent. So I think those are probably the big ones. And then you can do a little bit of profiling with, things that people wear. Again, it has to be in context and it has to be in clusters. You can't just say, this person is, for an example, like wearing a hoodie, and so they don't really care about what other people think of them nearly as much. It doesn't, like one thing doesn't necessarily mean another, but it could. So I'm going to look for other things in the conversation that also align with that.
Technically, I have a hood on my shirt, but I'm really paying attention to what you're saying. So yeah, we do. We have to fold the cluster there. Uh-huh. So there's been studies in communication then saying how important, let's say, tonality is, physiology, like nonverbal stuff, and language is actually the smallest kind of percentage of our communication. So how can someone then combine the language with the other things that you mentioned to really get results?
There's a lot of different ways that you can go about it if you're just talking like tactics. But I would say the biggest things to realize is it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about confidence and trust, right? Those two big things. As you learn about new things in your life, you're going to want to implement the things that you feel like are helpful. And when you implement them at first, they're probably not going to work very well because you're a very new beginner at it, right? And so when you implement them, they're probably not going to come off very well. They're not going to succeed very much. And so then you have the choice of like, well, do you want to double down on that? Or do you want to, give up on that? So lots of times when people go into implementing tonality, as an example, your brain will process the tonality of your words before the actual words themselves. And so, if somebody is really triggered on a sales call, changing your tonality to something maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit more playful, humorous, whatever it might be, something like that, will often take the pressure out of things and help with the situation. But when you do it the first time, it's going to feel weird, right? It's going to feel different. It's not going to be natural. And so your confidence level is also going to lower with that. So when you are implementing anything that you're learning with body language, with your tonality, anything that you're ever learning anywhere in life, even if it's a new word track, right? You just have to realize that as you start, your confidence level is going to go down. And then as it comes back up, that's where it will start to land much better, hit harder, be more effective.
That's a good one. Interesting. Because it's even too, like I've done training specifically for public speaking and stuff like that. And one of the things was like you finally, after a while, find that rhythm and the tonality of your voice to where it projects a certain way where you don't have to talk so loud, but the audience is like fully tuned into what you're saying. And it takes a bit because at first it feels like you're almost screaming at people. And, yeah, it is super weird. So you're also really good at structuring presentations that can sell like crazy. So how can someone then, I don't necessarily think of so much the word presentation like in sales all the time. People use it though. How can someone kind of from start to finish of a really important call where they're trying to close a client, then how can they really structure that to, make sure they get that deal?
So with presentations specifically, when we wrote that with the team, it was about, when you're in a sales environment, maybe you're presenting to a board or something, you've got like the slideshow behind you, right? Classic. If you're thinking of, your favorite movie where somebody's doing this, like that's exactly what it's like. It like that really happens. So it's when it can be with one-on-one as well, usually more so with the group. When you structure a presentation, there's a specific syntax that you need to go through that really does fall in line with everything that we've been talking about. So the first thing with a presentation is basically just attention, right? You have to get people's attention. If you don't have people's attention, nothing else works, right? And so you can do some sort of fun pattern interrupt. You can like just clap and like, oh God, mosquito, I got it. And like everybody will be right on you immediately. So something like that can be really helpful. Or like a really graphic image on the first slide, like funny graphic, not like off-putting graphic, but funny right on the first slide, like a picture of you in the shower or something blurred out. It's like, oh shoot, that was supposed to be sent to my wife, and we can skip past that. Like all their attention is going to be on you 100%. So then after attention is understanding, right? Humans like to understand things. You actually get dopamine when you learn something new that falls within your paradigm, the way that you view the world, the way that you think that it works. And so if you're able to explain and give understanding around, what you do, how the system works, et cetera, in the way that falls in line with their paradigm, that's really the key next step, right? That's the next one. After understanding is then, let me think here. It's been a little bit since I went through this. Understanding belief is next. So belief is the idea that, okay, I understand how it works, but will it work for me? So that's a key distinction there, because it can work for somebody else, but if you don't believe that it'll work for you, then who cares, right? You're not going to buy anything that you don't feel like doesn't work for you, even if it's like $5, $10. So belief is next. From there is then desire, right? Do you have a desire to actually take action on that, change things, et cetera, et cetera? After desire is then resources. So allocating resources, actually going through the steps of getting things over to legal, finance team, et cetera, et cetera. And then last but not least is action, actually taking action on the thing that you allocated resources to that you believe will help you and you have a desire to fix. If you take people through a presentation in that way, you will find it converts pretty darn well. So I've used this for any time that I give, a speech from stage, right? Talks, trainings. Even when I'm training people inside of the dojo, I go through this exact framework as well. When I'm on a sales call, pretty much anything, I use this.
Yeah, I was thinking it would work because it's almost like you're, when you brought up belief, that's kind of one of the objections people have, that, hey, it works for everyone else, but how is this possibly going to work for me? They don't believe it yet. So is the idea also to kind of put the objections like out in the open in front of them for them to see, so then at the end they've already been handled instead of coming out?
Spotlight effects. Yeah, 100%.
Nice. That's what I thought as you were saying it, because people say, oh no, it's not going to work for me. And
there's a saying that anything brought out into the open holds no power. So like if somebody is thinking something in their minds, maybe a limiting belief or, something like, it works for everybody else, but I don't know if it's going to work for me. If it stays in their head, then if you think about it like at the poker table, right, it's a card that they're still holding. You don't know what it is. And so then like, how much are you willing to gamble when you get to the end that card's an ace? Like I would rather get it out in the open earlier through questions, asking the person different things, so that we can handle it before there's the pressure of like, we had the conversation, right? Now there's money involved. Legal team says it's good to go, like all those sorts of things. Because then people do weird things under pressure, right? Again, they only have 20% of the intelligence that they usually would. So like, if this thing truly makes sense for the person, if it will truly help them achieve whatever goal it is, solve the problem, X, Y, Z, then like the natural intelligent next step is to move forward. 20% of your intelligence might tell you maybe it's not.
Interesting. No, that's good. I'm glad that I asked that question, because I think it'll be really helpful for everyone listening. Yeah. So, I think we even better. So I think we covered some good stuff here. You mentioned the dojo. So why don't you tell people if you have anything to add it, or if you want to tell people how they can, get into the sales dojo and all that, because there's tons of good stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%. So the sales dojo, if you are somebody who wants to, up level your influence, be able to persuade better, whether it be, getting a promotion, whether it be being able to communicate vision better to your team, if you're a business owner, if you're a salesperson just wanting to close more deals, the sales dojo is fantastic for that. And then if you are a business owner with a sales team and a sales process that you want to improve, we also do a lot of consulting and work on the B2B side of things. And then if you just want stuff for free and you want to learn all of that without paying any money, I'll also put something down there for you to be able to subscribe to the newsletter. We post things twice a week. So they're super short, like 30, 60-second reads, actionable things for you to implement to make more sales.
Nice. And if people want to find you on social media or anything, is there a certain platform you're on?
Pretty much Google me and I'll pop up everywhere.
Nice.
Facebook is probably my most active platform personally. So if you send me a message there, I'll probably respond pretty quickly.
Cool. Well, appreciate you coming on the show, Christian. It was really good to speak with you and, talk about all this interesting stuff.
Thanks for having me, Alex. It was a pleasure.
So thanks for listening. And wherever you listen to this podcast, please rate the podcast so it can get into the minds of more people. And I'd love to hear your feedback. And I hope to see you on the next episode.